All right, I'm gonna call the meeting of the select board, December 6th, order, 6:01 PM. One member of the select board is absent with prior notice. And we'll go ahead and get started with the agenda. Any public comments for items not on the agenda for discussion, not action? Yes. Hold on just a second, Michael. I'm hearing myself. Is there a way to mute the computer?
Yeah. I have to look at
I had enough that you guys have to listen to me. I don't want to listen to me.
Go ahead. Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Mike. Yep.
Okay. I had a brief update from the broadband committee.
Yep.
I couldn't get it together to get a formal report in, but you probably remember one of the biggest unknowns about the whole project was the make ready for the whole cost connection thing. And there's no way to find that out. In the event the budget did, we have to sum up $335,250 for that. Oh, not just make ready, all the next connected poles. Now we have paid, or we will have, by the time these, in tonight's warrant with some checks, that by the time they go out, we will have paid all those costs. And I'm happy to tell you that the total is $30,884.90. Approximately less than 10% of what we thought it was going to be. So this is good.
That's sound budget. Sound budget.
Not going the other way.
Yeah, and that's with both parties, both consolidated and CMP. I know CMP.
CMP is not charging us.
Right.
According to they're obeying the law. Consolidated is not obeying the law. In fact, it's challenging it in court.
Right.
Excellent.
That's great.
There's an unknown CMP may charge us. There's 7 poles that need to be replaced. Possibly they may think those are not made ready for something else. But that would be another $10,000.
Okay.
Excellent.
So this is good.
This is nice to get some good news.
Yeah.
Very much appreciate you coming to deliver it.
I thought you would like to hear this before.
Excellent. Good Christmas present. Thank you.
It's a good thing because the labor costs for building the system will almost certainly be higher than originally figured because it's been a couple of years now.
Right.
Well, you know what's happened.
Yep.
We have all the materials in order, so we missed out on the inflation.
Okay.
So that's good.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Excellent. Anybody have any questions on that? Mark?
Might be a stupid question. So we budgeted 300 and some odd $1,000 for this item. It's only costing 30 something thousand. Where does the rest of that money end up? Or well, how does that work budgetarily? Just don't use it?
I guess, unless we'll probably need some of it for construction. So just move it over into that category.
So it'll still be available in a real form.
Well, we may not get, if we don't spend it all, we may not get quite all the grant.
Oh, I got you.
Because
So it's a reimbursed situation.
And their idea is that since the grant is about half the cost of the system,
Yeah,
they want to keep it being about half the cost all the way down the line.
gotcha.
Rather than paying us all the money. And
Yeah,
so, but we have on the other hand, 975, that's whatever we spent.
Yeah.
Bond proceeds, so.
thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael.
Congratulations.
All right. Any other public comments for items not on the agenda? Seeing none, moving along. Town reports, town administrator report. Georgia.
Sure. I apologize for an update in the sentence morning, because there were a couple of very important things that happened between now and I first wrote it this morning, getting wrapped up. So I forwarded those out to you this morning. You should receive it in your email. Pretty much as I started up, I want to thank everybody for being kind and generous with their time and coming on board. We did get a lot accomplished in the last couple of weeks. We got the ad hoc finance committee off the ground, yay. I'm working with the IT vendor on some equipment, we may need some additional equipment to kind of secure things and I'll be ready to talk about that. The whole transition piece is in progress, we have to renew our SAM certificate so that we can do business with the feds. Tax liens went out, okay? They're too happy people about that. So waiting on DEP with this afternoon, but I did find out they'll be on Island on the 20th, which is excellent. Awesome, and I thought this. Congratulations, John, nice job. Draft audit, I talked to them this morning. They anticipate that we should receive it by Christmas. He's slammed, he's suffering issues with health and everything, like everybody else is. I pushed him on, I said, help us out here. So I have a commitment that we should receive it by Christmas. If I do not hear from him the week of Christmas, I will be back in touch with him. All right. I did review the Iowa proposal with CEO. I took a look at it and found it's more than meets the needs of what we're going to do. And it's probably an easy way to get some things accomplished and kind of like take us to the next generation level of service. All right. So I have no objections. I think we should do it. It's a good piece of software to use as well as what we're using it for. No reason not to purchase it, and especially at the price. Clerk candidate. We did the first interview, a second interview is being held tomorrow morning. If the individual is still interested in doing it, and her references check out, I will be making a plug to her. All right. Reconfiguration, as you can see from the report, I contacted John from Monadnock, due to the fact that when they approved the project in May, and it's now, 7 months later, we have a budget increase of $2,500, considering the cost of materials and how all of that works, and the delay of 7 months, the total price is $21,500, which is still less than what I think we budgeted for. I didn't find the additional cost to be outrageous considering the delays. I should thought it was going to come a lot higher. Okay, the DEP. We received a communication by email that we need to get solid waste reports in for the last few years. I got it's my impression that they hadn't existed for quite a while. I asked as to, okay, well, what do you want me to do? They asked me for so much, what do you want first? I worked out a deal with them. They wanted 22, but I said, well, listen, I just got here. What are we going to do? So I bought some time as we did the FY23 to then look on before, she emphasized before, the due date for the CY23, excuse me, which is usually in April. We'll be starting them and go back. I'm doing some research on whether or not how much of the data is it now. We're just going to pull up the bills, go through the tonnage and everything, and just kind of see where we're at and what it takes to the numbers. The form itself is not that onerous, it's just time consuming. But the big thing is getting the data, putting it together, and making it so that it meets the needs of what the state requires. So, get CY23 first, and then go back and see how far back they can really go. Storm pier quotes. I know it's that time of year. I talked to Justin and I talked to Gennaro. Yeah, I think we're going to do it next week. Okay, time people ready, same things last year. The perpendicular floor with the two behind and the others behind it, maybe just 2 floats in the water. Okay, it's fine. The reasonably pleased with that. The big thing I'm always concerned about and stuff like this is, it's December, weather. I don't, guys out there, safety first, ice and storm, that's my primary concern, particularly as our public works people are gonna be operating on, so it's, that's the thing I'm very, very concerned about. I just want to make sure they can operate in safe conditions and not have to do it like in January, which was notoriously much worse than December. And that's it.
Questions? Carol?
On the iWork software, is that something the board has to take an action on, or is that something you, the town administrators just pursue? And then I guess what I was wondering about is what the cost is for that.
The cost was, as I understand it, from last was $5,000.
Actually, 3,500.
3,500, okay.
Annually, an annual subscription?
I believe that's correct.
Yes, no, I remember.
Yeah, it started out at $5,000 when we balked a bit about it not being in our budget. Their position was that as long as we sign on by the end of December, they would reduce the cost in the first year to 3,500. I believe that was 3,500 per year ongoing. So it's the first year is installation and service, and then ongoing it's service.
So did we have a proposal with those figures in then?
Yes,
There is a proposal. My thought was that after George reviewed it and just now hearing that it sounds good to him, that we should have it be an agenda item and vote on it formally. I don't think it fits into anything we've approved prior. So we would have to figure out where that money comes from. Possibility that it could be moved from within the code enforcement budget, but that's kind of a
Yeah, we can.
tough number right now. We can figure that out.
That's a book issue. We purchased it as an asset for the town.
Yeah.
Just for the CEO. That's a book.
But George, if you could ask him, you could contact the sales guy and ask him, as long as we vote to approve on December 20, does that meet his needs? And then
Yep.
get him to give us a clean proposal with the exact first year cost and annual cost thereafter.
Yep.
And then we can have that be agenda item at the next meeting.
Okay, yep, I'll get on that tomorrow. Okay.
Other questions?
Couple quick ones, if I may. George, under some other items of interest, waiting on the DEP response for request to our meeting, did you give a date that they might come? Did I hear you say that, or did I
Yes,
miss?
the 20th, right? Chris?
December 20th?
Yeah, they called me. Originally, they were gonna come this week, but without Pete. I said
Okay.
no. So
Yeah.
they came, I said, find out when you can, what the dates are, and they just came back to me with that one date. So I said, I believe it's enough lead time. That will be
Is
it.
that still with Rob?
No, Rob won't be here.
He won't be here?
No.
Okay, here's my other question to that. Will a couple of us at least be able to participate in that discussion and site walk if we want to?
Yeah, and I think if more than 2 select board members wanna go, then we just. need
Just
to-
notice it,
But
because I may have interest in
Yeah.
participating.
But be
And I
mindful,
think,
just mindful of the fact that we're gonna back that up for posting as a meeting.
3 days.
3 days. All right.
Pretty
So I would appreciate if you keep us abreast of a time that they may
They're
arrive.
coming on the 10, 15.
Oh, they are?
Yep.
Okay,
Cousins on
thank you.
And is their focus Sandy Point, or is their focus?
No, their focus is Bennett's Cove, and I suggested while they are here that they look at Indian Point and Sandy Point. I believe that Pete is accompanying them. I may call Pete directly just so that I can kind of get some clarity, because the staff is pretty new to the whole thing, and they don't really know what the game plan is yet.
I know I would like to be there. I hear Mark saying he'd like to be there. I hear Carol. David, are you interested?
Very possibly.
I would suggest let's go ahead and plan on it being a public meeting and posting it.
And then the other thing we discussed on the phone, just, I don't want to take too much time, but, we decided that, December's not a good time for a workshop meeting, and so they have agreed to come back. I don't know about Pete, but the DEP will come back to cover all things shoreland in January. And I'd like to make that a public open workshop so that anybody who wants to come can come, the whole community, and, notice it well ahead of time. And that would be to answer community questions about shoreline zoning or shoreline projects, that kind of thing. So she said she would be willing to set that up when they come on the 20th. I think we should have some meeting dates in mind.
I would propose that for bookkeeping purposes for the 20th, we schedule a meeting for 10:30. When we get off the vote, so technically we're all together, you're covered under open meeting.
Yep.
Okay.
And the
Yeah,
meeting
and
would be on site.
Yeah, and I just want to say, George, I've encouraged them to contact you directly. I think you were copied on that email. Well, I don't know why they called me. I know, but I mean, I would also prefer to have them work through the town office, so you're in the loop. And so I-
suppose as well.
Right, so what I would do is tell her to, kind of send the particulars to you.
So would you be meeting on Bennett Cove?
I think that's exactly
Meeting at
right.
Bennett Cove?
And then we may want to come inside depending on the weather after that, but I think the meeting would be like a planning board type site walk thing. Yeah,
That's a Wednesday, so
right,
the hall will not be available per se.
the hall.
If we were going to meet indoors somewhere, the hall wouldn't be available because there's 10 o'clock coffee and noon lunch.
Yep.
10:30. If we spent an hour down there, 10:30, it's 11:30, so that's pushing it too close. So we'll have to think about meeting in the library, meeting at the rec center, meeting
Yeah, and
the conference room at the fire department,
Yeah.
another possibility.
I will talk to Pete. I think he probably knows more than the folks on
Yeah,
the.
yeah. Let's use the public safety building conference room that's the most easily reserved, I would imagine, on an interim basis. And that would be a continuation of the public meeting. That makes sense?
Yep, I think public.
That's perfect.
And one more very quick comment. George, with regards to the stone pier floats that will be hauled out of the water, historically, they've been identified as needing some more maintenance and work. So, I would suggest that Justin Doughty and I at least have a discussion with you once they're hauled up, maybe Public Works, about some stuff that we've already identified on these existing old floats, if we may.
It's my understanding, one of the floats, I'm not sure which one, it's been identified for replacement. So,
There is a new float coming.
which one that is, no idea.
That's
The worst one, obviously.
It's more that we're getting into the rotation of replacing one every so many years, so it'll probably remain to be seen which one needs to be replaced.
Yeah.
I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah, Carol.
So on the solid waste thing, Bob, you emailed me, when the greenhouse gas study, so the climate action team, as part of the greenhouse gas study, gave me the waste information, and we compiled some of it from the invoices in the town office. And then subsequently found out that there was a compilation, which I believe I have, and I forgot to even look at it. So I think there's a compilation that goes way back. I think the problem was we were on a fiscal year, they're looking for a calendar year. So I think before you go too far, you can have it. And I also think it was submitted to the department, and when Marjorie was here, I do remember that she was submitting it. I don't know, and then I believe it's been Tim that's been compiling the waste information from the invoices. But anyway, I think I have the spreadsheet. I think we're probably good to go. And so I think we're okay.
I'm doing some summary investigation as well. We may be further on than we think.
I think we've been doing it in expectation of this, because I think this is, I think we did provide some of the historical data already, but so the DP may be mistaken.
Speaking to the representative from DP, they acknowledged the fact that COVID put that behind, and then short staffing and all of that. So it wasn't like it was mandated to tomorrow. They were with us. That's how I was able to buy the time for CY 23.
Yeah, I think we're pretty current. I think we're current through like July on the other. So I'll send what I have to the entire board and George, just so everybody knows where we're at.
Okay. One more detail on that. If it's easy to give them a new copy of everything going back to the date they asked for, if that's easy to do, just doing that, that's fine. But also in earlier conversations with Ion about retaining length of retention of sent emails, they don't throw anything away. They've got a mirror of everything we've done with email. So we could, if necessary, do a search of emails that have been sent to DEP. If we believe we've already sent these, that could also be an easier way to do it. And I wouldn't hesitate to ask Ion's help in searching for that data.
Yeah,
And when we first got on the board, there was a solid waste study that had been done by G.P. Cobb.
Oh, yeah.
That had some waste information summaries in it.
I forgot about that.
So I think that's kind of what initiated.
Yeah, okay. All right. No other questions? Moving on to the treasurer's report.
So again, lack of reconciliation. Checking account was just under 2 million at, 1,962,598, and the reserve accounts were 1,804,893. There was one expenditure out of that. I also sent you, there's expenses and summary report as well, which it seems to be, which I have, and everything seems to be relatively in good shape from what I can see. I'm not overly concerned. I'm sure that as the year progresses, we may have some consistently, but at the just about the halfway point, with expenditures, I think we're in reasonably good shape. Without too much concern.
Questions? Mark?
The reconciliation situation, are we still expecting to engage our second prior town administrator, Margaret, to come down and help?
Yes, question is getting time and effort, and I'm trying to make that happen. We've had some other things pop up, as you know, and have something in place by the beginning of next week, so we can always put a date on it.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, regular business. Item 523-104, to hear an update on Weston and Sampson, and take any, Weston and Sampson and the Stone Pier project, and take any necessary action. Carol, did you want to give a brief update on that?
Yeah, so we had a meeting a week ago with Weston and Sampson and their subcontractor Woods Hole Group and the main DOT, Chris Mayo, and Bob and myself and George. And oh no, George, yeah, it's just Bob and I think on this one. And so we had talked with Chris about 7 or 8 months ago, just before we engaged Weston and Sampson, just to kind of check in on kind of where we're at. I think the high level points that came out in this meeting is DOT very much endorsed a phased approach to kind of implementing improvements at the stone wharf, that there's no way we can kind of just do it in one fell swoop, that it's gonna have to be over a long period of time in order to be affordable for the community. So that was kind of a fundamental thing. The other thing that Chris had said to us previously that he reiterated is that in order to qualify for the majority of these large scale federal funding mechanisms, we need a 30% design. And we aren't there yet. And also he mentioned that to do something like a congressionally directed spending request, we would have to have DOT endorsement, that we would not likely get funded by the delegation unless DOT is on board. And there were a few, kind of loose ends about some of the proposed design that he said, I don't want to go into too much detail, but he said, would need to be resolved before we could go forward with a funding request. So basically we have some things that would have to be solidified before we could make a financial request. the situation with Weston and Sampson is they've been kind of cooling their jets, waiting for the state to, or actually NOAA to deliver the bathymetry that we need for the modeling, and the decision was made recently because it's been months that we've been waiting. It was promised about it, you know, it was promised in June of 23, and it's looking like if we're lucky, it will be June of 24. And so the decision's been made that they'll go out and do their own data collection in a few areas in order to, you know, fill in some data gaps. It's not optimal, but it's kind of the best thing we can do to keep the project moving. That's gonna incur some extra expense beyond what's already appropriated for the project, but we're talking $3,000 or $4,000. So that's where we stand right now. So, and I would expect, I think the latest we got from Sam is that they would expect to be done with that phase, basically what they're doing for us right now by, you know, probably early spring, March, something like that. So it is a weather dependent, they have to go out and do some bathymetry measurements. I haven't heard back from Kirk with an actual estimate. So I think, you know, and I've talked to him a couple times, so anyway, it's gonna be weather dependent for them to get out there and be able to do that, but I assume that they're gonna be able to do that. They have some connections here on the island, I guess they're working with in terms of access to boats and other things, so. That's kind of it in a nutshell. I think it was good to check in with Chris Mayo. I think I didn't hear anything new from him, except a real emphasis on the phased approach. Oh, and then some of the, as you guys are aware on this sort of new design, some of the things may have some regulatory hoops. And I think the bottom line from DOT was that they did not see any real roadblocks. It's not that it will be, you know, smooth sailing, but, you know, there wasn't any red flag that, no, you shouldn't pursue this. So that's kind of, you know, that was sort of a read from him, but of course he's not the regulatory agency. So I guess I'd say that's kind of where it stands. So I think where we are right now is Weston and Sampson needs to finish their modeling. That informs the design elevation for the pier. And then I think beyond that, we will be looking at the next phase of some kind of a design so that we could probably get some funding for the first phase of whatever we're gonna do. And I think we're talking 3 to 4 phases for this project over a decade or more.
One clarification I would add, Carol touched on it, but I just want to emphasize it. The original plan with Weston Sampson leveraged some work that's being done for the state, which was originally expected to be finished by last summer. And that work is now delayed and delayed again to an extent that rather than hold our project hostage to that delay and stretching this phase of the project out another several months, Weston Sampson and we've discussed them doing a small slice of that bathymetry work that needs to be done by the state that's germane to the Stone Pier project, and having Woods Hole do that work independent of the state work, independent of that state timeline, so that we can keep this project rolling. As Carol said, it's anticipated to be an additional $3,000 to $4,000 for this phase of the project. I would expect we could take that money out of the Stone Pier capital budget without much problem. Carol, did you think we should do that tonight, or should we wait till we have a quote?
We don't actually have a number, and I guess what I would like to do is maybe make a motion that we appropriate up to $5,000 out of the Stone Pier Reserve Fund to cover the cost of, you know, the bathymetry or Weston and Sampson.
Is that a motion?
Yeah.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mark. Discussion?
So
David?
just to be clear, this $5,000 is in anticipation of future expenses. It's not going out the door right away.
No, well, no, we don't know the exact amount. So I think, but I don't expect it to be beyond $5,000, but in the next 3 months.
Yeah. And I would offer that the benefit of approving it tonight is that if they come back to us tomorrow and say, we're ready to go on this, and the weather clock is ticking. The weather window is very abrupt here in terms of getting a boat in the water to do this kind of bathymetry work. So that if we've already approved 5,000 and they come back and say it's 3,500, or they say it's 49.99, or whatever they say, we've already approved it, so we can pull that trigger rather than waiting until December 20th. That get it for you, David? That answer? Okay. And Mark, you had a question?
I'm sorry, my question is not related to the motion, so I'm gonna wait till we.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, all in favor? 4-0.
And before we leave this, the stone pier, or this project, and Georgia may remember, but the grant theoretically is supposed to be, the work is supposed to be completed by December 2023. So we need to request an extension. It's very well justified because of the delay on the NOAA bathymetry. And I think Vika had it in her last TA report. So, the grant is the coastal, I mean, I'll communicate with you, George, but I think it's merely an email to the person at the state to say we need an extension. And we should do it though before the end of the year. Every request, yeah.
All right. All right, so yeah, Mark, yours.
First of all, I'd like to thank you guys for all this work with Weston and Sampson. So in March of 2024, we may have a proposed first phase height number. Is that?
Well, we will have, what they will do is do some simulations, and that will help inform a decision that is not just up to the engineering firm, but partly up to the community about kind of what our final design elevation is. So yes, that's what we're shooting for. And so that decision is important because it's kind of how much conservatism is that they want to build into it, because it's projected. Nobody really knows.
Yeah.
And the goal is to maybe build a structure that's somewhat adaptable so that if the projections are not as bad or better or worse, that it's not going to be like a rebuild.
Understand. My point will be quick. But at some point, when we start talking about capital improvement projects for the 1, 5, 10, 15 years out, I would like to get the Stone Wharf Road back on that discussion. And the reason I'm bringing that up in conjunction with this is elevation.
Right.
In other words, at some point, it would be very beneficial to pursue having the Stone Wharf Road be 2 lanes, passable traffic, and a parking design, either similar to what we're doing now or different on one side, and possibly getting back to the property or not that the golf course owns. I think that's important to not let fall off the radar.
No, in fact, I think that will be an important part of the next steps.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I would emphasize that at the time that we're widening the road, also at the downhill end of it, raising it or not as necessary,
Well, that's my
and tying
point.
it to that parking thing,
That's my point.
wrapping it all
Yeah.
together is perfect. Yep. David.
I just wanted to say, I think that's been a 6-year project that we've been on, and it's way overdue.
Yep. All right. Okay. So I need to go back to committee reports. I had some notes here that I neglected to bring up under town reports. I wanted to report out briefly for the facilities committee. The public safety building design, the early or the conceptual design, that committee would now say is complete. And that includes budgetary numbers put together by a construction firm who would be interested in being the partner. There was discussion on the benefits of going out for bid versus doing the partnering approach that's often done these days with these kind of projects. But we have the kind of numbers that Port City actually believes, and the committee believes, give us what we need to have initial conversations with both ourselves from a financial planning standpoint, and ultimately what is our appetite from a bonding standpoint, but also to have initial conversations with congressional representatives. And I went back to Port City and confirmed that they really believed that we have the information in hand now to begin those conversations with congressional representatives. And their reply was, what we have now is exactly what they had in hand with several other towns in Maine who went forth to ask for congressional money and were given such money. They've given me the names of several towns, so we could follow up with them if we want to. So, nothing needed from the board at this point, other than to know that, that committee has gotten to that point in their work. Separate but related, George has already talked about the redo of the office and that 2,500 additional cost. That's within what we approved for a budget for that project, so that's going forward. But the committee was very helpful in getting that started up. And then lastly, we just received today, and I forwarded to you all this afternoon, I forwarded one of these two things to you guys. We just received, I've not sent this to you yet, but we received information from Port City regarding a site plan layout slightly revised from what had been proposed earlier for the power feed and backup power sourcing for the tower, the needs of the current office and the broadband needs. And the next step is to, after a conversation tomorrow with Beth and me and Dave Bruner, we'll be talking to broadband about the detailed drawings and that kind of thing. But ultimately getting ready for a meeting next week that Nat Tupper called, where we'll be sitting down with the three towns related in the tower conversation, just to give them an update on where that is. And some members of the committee thought it might be a bit early to have that conversation with the three towns. Nat really wanted the meeting because he's on the way out the door and he wanted to kind of get it in a good packaged place to hand it off to whoever his successor might be. So we'll be meeting next Monday with those three towns. So that's the update from the broadband committee. Nothing required from the board. Yes, Carol.
So on the public safety building, I just think, it would be good to, once you have some numbers and an estimate, it'd be good to provide that to the finance committee, because that's exactly what they're gonna be looking at. And I think it's also important that, you know, the board in general looks at the constellation of large scale projects we've got to do and decide, because we may decide CDS money might be better for phase one of the Stone Pier because maybe we fully fund it. So I just think that, given how some things have happened in the past, I think it's important that sort of the board and the town administrator in the driver's seat on that, and that committee members understand they should take the direction there, because we have multiple projects that are gonna need to be prioritized. And we may want to look at different funding sources for different projects. And even for the public safety building, I don't think typically, for example, the congressionally directed spending will fully fund those projects, so you probably have to bond or something. So anyway, I think, and I don't know if that project lends itself to phasing quite as easily, probably not.
No, the only phasing aspect of that project could be, probably would be actually, the public safety building phase one, and then the retrofit of the existing building phase two.
Okay.
David, push.
No,
that's a good point though, in terms of CDRS, just thinking about those two in conjunction. Are they separate? Should they be considered together? Should we think about presenting it as, do we have to pick one or can we do two? But the finance committee is a key part of that conversation.
Right, and I think typically the community would talk to that office and they would sort of give us a read on which one might be more fundable. So I think that would be, but that needs to be coordinated, that's.
When I sent that email out today, I did include the chair of the finance committee.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so apologize for going back on that. And we've now finished that and we've finished Weston Sampson. Public comment on the Weston Sampson conversation or the facilities committee thing?
Just a question, the UN issued a new report on sea level rise just before COP began last week. And sea level rise is happening much faster than was anticipated, and we happen to live in the fastest warming water on the planet. And so, I'm hoping that there's awareness of, the new forecast as the plans are coming together for, elevation.
Thank you, Pam. All right. Item 23-105, discuss a gift of recognition in honor of Nat Tupper's retirement and take any necessary action. I know there've been several ideas discussed. I would like to recommend that we do something very specific to Shabig and would suggest the idea of a gift certificate to the Shabig Island Inn, rolled up and sitting in a couple of those nice heavy-duty stoneware mugs from the Historical Society. It's a token. We're not trying to, offer remuneration or anything. Seems like an appropriate amount. A $200 gift certificate would cover a nice dinner for him and his wife, and the mugs are probably 25 a piece, so $250 feels reasonable and conservative. But interested in other ideas? Or
I'll second that.
okay, I'll make a motion that's already been seconded. $200 gift certificate to Shabig Island Inn with 2 of the Shabig mugs.
We'll have to be specific that it's probably coming out of our contingency, likely.
Yep. I can't imagine where else that would come from.
And it's okay that we do that, right, out of our town funds?
I mean, appropriate.
Yeah,
I don't know if I know the answer to that. It seems like it probably is okay.
yeah, okay.
I'll amend my motion to say, assuming that our town administrator can do a little checking into policy, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
David, yeah.
In terms of state policy, I know that I have a chair from the town of Yarmouth serving on the school committee, and they haven't been taken to jail yet. So
Okay, great. That's all I need to know.
I've been looking for you.
That's considered, the mugs are definitely token, and then,
Dinner.
if you're gonna share, it's much more expensive. Yeah. Okay, I wouldn't be too concerned.
Yeah, that's good.
Just for the record, that the dinner is in recognition of the fact that Nat has said to several of us how much he and his wife enjoy boating. They have a boat that they keep over in Yarmouth, and they enjoy boating out to Shabig and kind of being under the radar. But as opposed to giving them a gift certificate to Forest Street or something like that, the inn just seems more relevant to something like this. So, motion on the floor, discussion, all in favor? 4-0. All right. Any other business that the board would like to bring up at this point?
I never know that this goes on other business or communications, but, I think I mentioned previously that we applied for a climate resiliency fellow in GPCOG. So GPCOG has a program, an AmeriCorps program that they subsidize through a bunch of USDA grants. And the bottom line is we can get a fellow for $3,200 for a 10-month stint to work on climate related projects, and in particular, the work that the climate action team is doing. And, so we've been awarded, or fellow has been selected, and we have continued to work for Shabig. We are not responsible for housing, and so I'm working. I have not heard back yet. We have funding within our climate resiliency grant. I'm trying to get the governor's office to agree to let us appropriate some of that money for the fellow. If that isn't successful, then I'm going to come back at the next meeting and ask the town to appropriate money from someplace for this fellow, because it's just too good a deal to pass up. So it's 40 hours a week for 10 months for $3,200. And she could work on the Stone Pier project. She can do GIS work. She's got quite a few skills. So I'll let you know, but I'll let George know, and if we have to come back with a proposal, we'll look and see where the best funding sources.
Yeah, I heard we talked about that a little bit. I think letting her work on Stone Pier project would be absolutely brilliant for us.
Right. Just, she could do things like schedule meetings and, do all the things that none of us have time to do, plus the work. I mean, I wish I'd had her this summer, but we still have quite a bit to do on our climate action team grant, and she could be very helpful on that. So anyway, it's a great deal. She's from, she graduated from Guild and she's been working here in Maine for about a year. So,
And she would not live on the island, so we don't have to worry about housing. She would-
but we would have to also appropriate some money for transportation.
Right, so that's an agenda item for the next meeting.
Yeah, and if I can appropriate the grant money, and we don't even have to go to the pool, great.
Wonderful,
If I
wonderful,
can't, then we're gonna, but I'll work it out with George and team.
Any other business? Okay, moving on to communications. George, anything to report in terms of communications?
Nothing of substance, I mean, basically what you saw in the report that I did, and I'm gonna try to just morph that into more than what you see there, because it's actual upfront, things change at the 11th hour, we're, you know, the turning, like the thing on Monday.
Yep.
I had a report that came out of the blue, drop everything and just make that work, so. I think that's the TA report is gonna, I would hope, take place in the communication report, you're gonna get it all. So.
Well, I have two items of communication I wanted to report on. A couple of you were copied, actually just Mark was copied on one of them. Communication from John Lang dated November 30, just an update on the work happening down at Hamilton Beach. And this is the homeowners paying for restoration of a major seawall effort down at Hamilton Beach, and the town paying for a very small portion of it that relates specifically to a public access that is town-owned land. Very little happened Thanksgiving week due to weather, tides, and holidays. Crew took vacation time. Last loads of rock being delivered today, including rock, base of town stairs that they will pin in place. Tide and weather good next week to take place Tuesday through Friday. Pictures to follow. So just a brief update that project is moving forward. And the second piece of correspondence that looks like all of us received, but wanted to mention it, from Courtney Dowdy on behalf of the school committee, asking if, stating that the school committee plans to have a meeting, hopefully in January, with CTC to talk about contract and budget and expenditure items, and asking if the town would like to have the TA, select board would like to have the TA and perhaps possibly one or two select board members participate in that conversation. I would certainly encourage us to be involved in that conversation. I know George has spoken in the interest of being on part of that conversation. So is it safe to say back to Courtney that we're interested? Carol?
Yeah, I think we definitely should participate, and I think one thing we could consider is just a town contract with CTC that covers all the bases, not just the school, so it's an option that we could talk about. I think before that meeting, though, maybe as a select board should have a discussion about what we think is important. Yeah.
Should we make that an agenda item for the next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all the correspondence I had.
What was it for the next meeting?
CDC contract.
CTC contract conversation, January with school committee. All right, Carol.
So I tried to say that Rob Wood, who contacted us initially, there's a separate project proposed down there, Sandy Point, a shorefront armoring project, and so he provided the contact person for that specific project, because it's not easy to figure that out. And that project is adjacent to Sandy Point, and personally, I have concerns about the potential negative impact of that project on the sand supply to Sandy Point, which is a, designated coastal barrier resource. So I would like to, I'm recommending to the board that we ask DEP to have a technical review of that project, in particular, any, evaluating any potential negative impacts on, this coastal barrier resource, which is a very important resource. to the community.
And the intertidal zone, I would,
But I'd like to have the board make that request. I think it's, well, that way some, some of the technical people at the Maine Geological Survey might be able to review it, and which they don't typically do. So normally the process for these is they go in and they get approved permit by rule. And there isn't really much technical review. So according to Rob, if the town would like to have a more thorough review, we should request it formally. And the timeline is that he would expect that the permit would be issued in either late January or February. So we should do it soon. Make the request if we want to have a review.
comments from the board? Mark?
Is the permit on the permit request on the Coleman Cove side of? Is
It's,
the person that, I'm not,
Extends actually all the way from Coleman Cove to Sandy Point, or to Jenks Road.
It's pretty much that whole stretch. It's several hundred feet.
gotcha.
So three landowners, 3 separate applications for one project.
Right.
Yeah, so it's facing Coleman Cove. Thank you. I have one communication quickly when she's done.
Okay, yeah. So David, you have a, okay, solid pen moving.
So would the board, I don't know if we need a vote on this, would the board be comfortable with me crafting a short email that George could send to the contact person to make that request?
On behalf of the board.
Yeah.
I'm perfectly comfortable with that.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Carol. Mark?
My communication was a very quick verbal communication from a married couple, residents of Chevig, that I passed on to you and George about the sagging puddle down at the stone wharf. I think
Okay.
I passed that on to you by email. And I just wanted to let you guys know that that's why I passed it on.
Okay.
They asked me to.
Okay,
What's their concern?
The concern was the puddle where you get on and off the boat.
all right. No other communications? All right, next item, to approve the minutes from November 15, 2003.
So moved.
Motion by Mark, second by David. I will not be voting because I was not at the meeting. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. 3-0, 1 abstain. All right. Items to be placed on a future agenda. I've made a few notes, Chris. I think you made a few notes as well. For that, if you do. Okay, we can coordinate as we get closer to the next meeting. We're getting better at how we set up our agendas. All right, would move to, I would entertain a motion to close the meeting and enter into executive session.
Could I suggest an item for a future agenda?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Could we possibly get back to our discussion of possible amendment to our parking and traffic ordinance?
Yeah, that's still on the list, but yes, that's a good idea. Okay, actually, yes, there may be, hey, Josh. Yes, we'll talk about a potential addition to that. Yeah, okay. All right. Motion, Mark?
I'd like to make a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to MRSA 456A personnel.
There a second?
Second.
Second by David and Carol. All in favor? 4-0. Hey, Josh, thanks for. All right. In case one of us needs surgery, he's here.
Yeah.
Looks like you're ready to.
Ready to roll.
Ready to cut somebody off.